Major General Muhoozi Kainerugaba has revealed that he will play a much larger security advisory role, which will dovetail aspects of the military, police and national security. He made the comments while speaking during an interview with NTV held in Entebbe.
I'll be advising the President and Commander-in-Chief on enhancing the capabilities of our special operation forces. There are some in the military, there are some in police and in other areas. But there'll also be an element of national security as well, advice on national security. And also when I was a commander of SFC, I was focused on that formation. But now, when you talk of all these special operation forces that are available, and when you expand that to talk about national security as well, that's a different platform from just commanding the Special Forces Command.
Last week, the Commander-in-Chief, President Yoweri Museveni, reshuffled the army and moved Kainerugaba from the Special Forces Command to a new role as the Presidential Advisor on Special Operations. Kainerugaba has been at the helm of an elite army which possesses motorized, mechanized and armory units. The unit also guards the President and key security installations. The SFC has gradually morphed from the Presidential Protection Unit under Akanga Byarhanga to the Presidential Guard Brigade and finally to a fully fledged fighting force. With its disposition towards restoring sanity in the volatile Great Lakes and the restive Horn of Africa enclave, the Special Forces Command continues to grow in combat experience.
Our work with regards to infrastructure development, which we have achieved a lot in the time I was in command. We have done a lot to tackle issues like improving accommodation, improving training facilities. So that's a big achievement.
However, critics believe Kainerugaba's military trajectory is not by accident, but by design. A coterie of young cadet officers, Intake 6, graduated on September 21, 2000 at the Gaddafi School of Infantry. Amongst them was Kainerugaba, who joined the elite Sandhurst and Fort Leavenworth military academies. Some observers believe that the military seeds planted in Kainerugaba will later sprout and help him to ascend to the presidency as part of a carefully calibrated plot orchestrated by his father. It's a theory he discounts.
That so-called project is non-existent. It simply does not exist.
As a presidential advisor, Kainerugaba will have the modicum of freedom to understand the rough and tumble of elective politics while keeping an eye on security. Observers believe this will give him a deep understanding of civil relations after spending over 16 years in the army.
As far as this new position, preparing me for politics, I think that's what you're trying to say. I don't think that's the case, because I know, and most people know, the path to politics. It's different from the one I'm on right now. So if I retired and went and stood in my constituency, then you'd say, okay, now he's now taking on a political career. But this is far from that. I'm still within the national security framework of the country.
Would you consider joining politics, elective or otherwise?
Right now, that's not on my radar at all, as I said before, because we're looking at other tasks. I'm going to be focused on my new job, my new role. I'm not considering a political career right now.
A viewer will say you're not considering it right now, but you could consider it.
Again, we're back to hypotheticals. I don't like dealing in hypotheticals.
There are fears that even as he takes on his new role, he will still oversee the SFC under what many believe is his protege, Colonel Don Nabasa.
No, things don't operate like that. The new commander is experienced, he is capable, he has had a long period of time within PPU, PGB, SFC, so he knows what the work entails. He doesn't need somebody looking over his shoulder. He will have full command as the commander. If he asks for advice, I'm always willing to provide advice to anybody, not only my successor.
I also asked him about the role of the army in the country's politics.
You cannot have the civilian population here, the military here, the economy here, isolated from each other, mutually exclusive. The way the world looks at national security now is that all things are connected. There's interconnection. So if you say from partisan politics, yes, but you cannot divorce security from the other aspects of the nation or of national security.
Okay,
economics.
maybe if I could just rephrase, the politics that I'm talking about is involvement in politics, where we saw, say, just this last year in Feb, where the army and the military in general were accused of actively participating in politics by, quote-unquote, curtailing dissent, curtailing people that they thought were against the NRM.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that. That is now you're trying to put me in partisan politics.
As the old guard retire, the young Turks now occupy what had been preserved for those who fought on the treacherous battlefront, anchored on the kingpin philosophy.
They have the experience, they have the training, and they are still relatively young. So I think it's a good team, and I think they're going to do a good job.
Shiran Wuchre, NTV. He's rarely in the public limelight and will hardly say a word, especially to journalists. And yet, commander of the Special Forces Command, the newly promoted Major General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, remains one of the most talked about personalities in the country. Major General Muhoozi is a subject of debate due to persistent claims that his father, President Yoweri Museveni, is grooming the son to succeed him in an alleged scheme dubbed the Muhoozi Project. The so-called Muhoozi Project gained more prominence in April 2013 when then-coordinator of intelligence agencies, General David Sejusa, wrote in a missive that later leaked to the media that a plot was afoot to assassinate senior army officers and government officials opposed to Muhoozi succeeding his father. In a rare interaction with the media, Major General Muhoozi spoke about the subject for the first time.
There's been talk about the Muhoozi Project. What do you say about it?
It doesn't exist. Non-existent. That is a red herring.
In the 2013 missive that later forced him to flee to exile in London for fear of his life, General David Sejusa named the then Army Chief, the late Aronda Nyakairima, Inspector General of Police General Karekehura, and former Prime Minister Mama Mbabazi as those opposed to the alleged Muhoozi Project. But General Muhoozi says he's not interested in any political office, much less the presidency.
I don't have the ambition to be president. I'm very happy being in the military, and that's where I intend to stay for some time.
The Special Forces commander, hitherto a brigadier, spoke to journalists moments after he was decorated. This means Muhoozi is one rank shy of becoming a 4-star general, the final rank in the army hierarchy. For a man who joined the army in 1999, Muhoozi's meteoric rise has raised many eyebrows. In just 17 years, he's about to hit the army rank ceiling. This is probably the reason critics argue that his father, the Commander-in-Chief, General Museveni, is grooming his son for the country's top job. Muhoozi disagrees.
As you heard, there's a process. There's a commissioning board that looks at each case by case and decides. So you've never heard of a message where I promote myself.
In the wake of General Muhoozi's promotion, there were media reports that he had to be elevated to match the new outlook of the Special Forces Command, which was to be transformed into an independent service force like the Land Forces and the Air Force within the National Army, the UPDF.
There is nothing like independent in the UPDF. We are all joint. It's a joint force. We all work together. So talk of independence is misplaced. That's not going to happen. There may be adjustments, there may be changes, but the UPDF is one army and SFC is part of that army. You saw me saluting my commander, the CDF.
During the pimping ceremony at the Army headquarters in Mbuya, Kampala, over 700 newly promoted officers were decorated. Anthony Chakabare, who in 2001 declared war on government and later returned to the fold, was promoted to colonel and retired. Presidential Advisor on Defense and head of the Army Land Board, Joram Mugume, was also pipped as Lieutenant General, the second highest position in the Army. Uganda's Army ranks that are taken from the British tradition following this order from the highest to the lowest. A General or 4-star, Lieutenant General or 3-star, Major General or 2-star, Brigadier, Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel, Major, Captain, Lieutenant, Second Lieutenant, Officer Cadet, which is held during the initial officer training. Chief of Defense Forces, General Katumba Wamala, urged the newly promoted officers to maintain discipline, whether inside or outside the Army.
Must desist from all forms of ideological manipulation and bad politics, as it will undermine the process of building and consolidating our national unity. Together, we must guard and protect our country's peace and security as a strategic national interest.